Okay, so item 2.1 is the approval of our minutes from January 13th.
What page are we on?
We are on page 36 of your packet.
36, right.
Sorry.
So move.
Okay, Jonathan moved. Jennifer second. Oh, and just a reminder, as we're in the open session, we've got the recording on. So we are in open. Okay, so moved, the approval of the minutes. Item 3, motion to adopt the agenda as it's laid out here. Okay, John and Brian second. Okay, and item number 4, any conflicts of interest that anyone needs to declare based on the agenda? Okay, none noted. Okay, so on page, hi. If you guys can hear better, you can sit over there, whatever you like.
I think we.
All right, you're good? Okay, you can probably hear me. I just don't know. Everybody's as loud as me. All right.
What page are we on there?
We are going to page 42, item 5.1. So this is the internal report to receive and file.
So moved.
Okay. Second, Jennifer. Okay. All right. Okay. All in favor? All in favor? I forgot about that. I should be, yes.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you for that catch.
No problem.
All right. Okay, so then item 6.1, we have an update on the Duxbury study. So Chris Walchutz has agreed to join us. Thank you very much for joining us. And this is a study that I think most of us haven't heard a lot about. And it was, I think, put on really the agenda by the previous commission, and Chris Walchutz has been taking this on the commission's behalf. So I thought it would be valuable for us to hear firsthand how the study is going, what the scope is, what we should expect, and in terms of recommendations, timing, that kind of thing. So I'll hand it over to you, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In the hopes of being a little bit less incoherent than usual, I've typed up a list that I intend to read, and very happy to try to answer any questions you may or may not have. The Duxbury report is a formal academic study focusing on sustainability of policing in Canada. They're looking into the efficiency and cost containment. They're looking into efficiency and cost containment. Dr. Duxbury and a team of researchers received funding for this study from the federal government. I'd just like to read you a little background before we get into the nuts and bolts of the report itself. A few years ago, the St. John Police Force was at the cutting edge of modern police work. The genesis of this was the Commission of the Day embracing the concept of community policing, a radical change in philosophy from the then current top-down militaristic policing model to one which sought to resolve problems with the cooperation of the community. That was a radical change at the time. Chief Beaudeschon had a vision which evolved from the original community policing model to explore concepts like intelligence-led policing. Chief Reed built upon the solid foundation so established, and he honed and fine-tuned the model with many innovations and improvements. Both chiefs were sustained and encouraged by committed commissioners. The end result was a level of efficiency and success that was the talk of the policing community. And by that I mean the wider policing community, trade journals and magazines. We had a very, very good reputation at the time. Dr. Duxbury was developing and seeking funding for her, At the time Dr. Duxbury was developing and seeking funding for her project, the St. John Police Force was at the peak of its sterling reputation. She was keen on including us in her study into sustainability, efficiencies, and best practices in Canada to potentially benefit everyone by sharing our successes with those of other police forces and vice versa. Now, to get down to the local level, an early activity was the establishment of a so-called Police Public Working Group. Former Deputy Bruce Connell and I struck a membership list from police officers, community leaders, and activists. There were 18 participants. I chaired the PPWG. We spent time with the research team with the intent of providing a community perspective on policing in St. John. The researchers digested the material and fed it back to us for comment, and in that way we refined their knowledge of our opinion. The work of the 6 PPGs is a central consideration for the researchers. They are also guided by a regional advisory board, which consists of the 6 chairmen of the police forces in the study, and also a representation of highly police thinkers, both from academia and the outside world. And there they've got people who are well known in the policing world. Jonathan Mukherjee, for example, is on it, and several teachers and professors. And, they've got some pretty high octane people there. And that's really what I wanted to say, except the team will be in St. John in early April, and they'll be very pleased to attend the commission meeting if you invite them. And that is more satisfactory, obviously, to answer the questions directly rather than through me. Lastly, I'd like to say I am able and willing to remain as the intermediary between the board, the community, and the research team, if that's your desire. I'd be happy to do that. Now, when you invited me to come and do it, I hadn't a clue what sort of stage we were at or anything else. I did know they were in town fairly recently and that you had spoken to me. So I had a chat with Dr. Bennell. He's the one that's in charge of St. John. Duxbury is overall in charge of the whole toot. And there's underlings, and Craig Bennell is our so I gave him a call, and I'd just like to he responded by way of email, so with your indulgence, I'd like to read that out. Hi, Chris. I've had a chance to talk to the full team now, because when I spoke to him, he said, well, I'm very constricted, and I only have my own thing. Given the stage we're at with our research at St. John, I'm afraid I won't be able to provide you with detailed answers to your questions at this time, because I gave him a series of questions. But I'll do my best to provide you with some information that you can provide to your commission members this week. 3 members of our research team were in St. John from January the 31st to February the 4th, conducting interviews with officers from the patrol section, community services, and CID. We conducted 37 interviews in all. I've attached, well, that's he did, but I'm not going to bother you with it. I've attached the interview script. We were this is something you need to listen to. We were very pleased with the willingness of the officers to take part in our interviews and for being so gracious with their time and openness. Staff Sergeant Fleming was also an extremely important part of this process. So kudos there. Both in preparing for our visit and lining up officers for the interviews. We need this level of involvement to move forward, and we are all very appreciative of his time and commitment to the project. Going forward, we are now in the process of transcribing the interviews we conducted, and after that we will be examining the content of the interviews, which will help us determine what the longer-term project will look like in St. John. We are also reaching out to each of the officers we interviewed 2 to 3 times to ask them about their daily tasks. This will give us a much clearer, more accurate picture of the roles that these officers play. Following these shorter interviews, we might carry out some focus groups with a subset of the officers to dig deeper into a few key issues that emerged from the interviews. Given that the scope of the longer-term project will fall out of these interviews and focus groups, it is too early to provide you with the detailed answers read the scope of the project, because that's what I wanted to know. When are you going to come? When are you going to talk to us? When are we going to get results?
Right.
And they're not prepared to commit to that yet. They're suggesting, I guess, that that will evolve depending upon what happens. So when I say, when are you going to present your findings to us, there's no answer to that yet.
Okay, yeah, because something that you said there, he mentioned when they review their interviews, they'll determine the longer-term project in St. John. So
this is
we don't.
a self-feeding hydra monster.
Okay,
You know?
so depending on what they find, then they'll go after
Then they'll chase that
certain
down.
area. Well, that's going to be
Yes.
really helpful for us.
That's where we are.
Okay.
And again, he refers again, in terms of timeline, we will conduct the follow-up interviews with the officers in February and March. And as it stands now, we plan to make another visit to St. John in early April.
Okay.
And I suggested, and he is open to the idea of sitting right here.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, you'd have to invite them, blah, blah. You might even have to call a special meeting if it doesn't suit their travel arrangements, because they're trying to minimize travel in hotels for obvious reasons.
Well, I think it'll be well worth our time to make sure we do that.
It's so much better to talk to them direct and ask questions arise. You can talk to the horse's mouth rather than its other end, which is me. And after that, we will have a much clearer vision of the project's scope, its timeline, and the approach we'll be taking to St. John. Sorry, nice to talk, blah, 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 blah. So that's really what I wanted to occupy your time with. If there's a question I could try to answer, I'm not totally sure I'll be able to. But Glenn's a knowledgeable fellow, he knows about stuff.
I don't know whether everybody heard Linda Duxbury's interview on CBC yesterday morning, Monday morning, I guess. You can get it on the web and listen to it. I think it provides a bigger picture of what they're looking at. And she talked about our police force here. She talked about the issues facing police forces across the country and how we're dealing with them here and how other people are dealing with them. So I think it would be, if you didn't listen to the interview, it would be worthwhile going into the web and listening. She struck me, the interview struck me as being extraordinarily positive about our police force and about our community policing and about, I mean, she's fully aware of the challenges that our force faces here. She talks about the higher unemployment rate in St. John compared to some of the other communities that they're studying. She's talking about all the big issues that police forces are facing. She's talking about the huge crunch on policing costs right the way across the country. And what I was kind of taken with, I mean, she talked about the mental health issue and many of our officers sitting in hospitals guarding people who are taken in. And she's saying, look, we really, in this process, we have to examine what police forces across the country are doing, what is expected of them, and shouldn't the hospitals, she mentions that should the hospitals not be taking over the guarding of the people sitting in the waiting rooms there. So I'm familiar with what we're tackling, and her interview kind of expressed it quite well. So I recommend that you listen. And I was also quite taken with her very positive sense about what our force has been doing here over the last years. So recommend that to you. It's tackling all the big issues that police forces are facing across the country. And anyway, it was a good interview.
Good. Any questions for Chris?
Madam Chair, I just want to make one more observation. I really believe this is an extraordinarily valuable exercise. It goes right to the nub of what we're talking about, efficiency and cost containment, all the good stuff. And the other thing I'd like to point out, the only reason we have this Duxbury report using St. John as one of our testaments is Commissioner Franklin, through his work at the CAPB, or it's called CAPG, got to hear of it and expressed our interest, and it grew from there. So I think this is a big deal.
It is a big deal, yeah. So thank you for your leadership in this, Jonathan. And I think it's going to serve us well. So it'll be interesting to see how long this goes on, because I kind of had in my head, and I didn't know what their timeline was. So we'll hear more, and I'll definitely invite them when they come in April. I'll get in touch with them, and we'll figure out.
They talked initially about 2 years.
2 years was the
2 years, and when did they start?
I think they've been going about a year now, Chris.
Okay.
Or
A good fact here, yes.
yeah.
Okay.
But I think this expands,
Sounds like
fill
it.
the money
Yes.
available. Probably.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, and it sounds like with 37 interviews that they're going to get a lot of great information and.
But that's just us. There are other big police forces.
Oh, well, so then they take that. That's just exactly. So that's us, and then there's 5 other forces they're doing this with, right? So.
And just in conversation with Dr. Duxbury when she was down here once, she is hoping that this will prove so beneficial that the federal government will throw more money at her to do more in a different aspect.
Yeah.
So this could last for a long time.
Yeah, and you know what? It doesn't surprise me to hear that, because everything that you read, and I get a lot of questions now about the challenges facing, the budgetary challenges facing our police service specifically, and everything that I'm reading is we're absolutely not alone in that. And so I think to be part of a study like this and to hopefully get some recommendations and some insight about how other police services are tackling some of these things and how we might be able to provide best practices to some of those other police services as well. I think it's really going to help us in the long term. And so I know I was kind of had in my head that this could feed into our strategic planning process. So maybe it's part of our refresh next year, and think about how do we incorporate some of these recommendations, some of the findings, and whatever follow-on work the longer-term project in St. John that they're talking about includes, and if they do get more money. So I think it's very positive. And thank you for joining us tonight, Chris. Much appreciated. And again, thank you to Jonathan.
If the spirit moves you, I'd be happy to be the intermediary. On the other hand, I won't cry for too long if you say no, we've got a better idea.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so was this what he sent, was this part of our package, or was this separate? Do I need to receive and file this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I distributed that tonight.
Okay, great. So the report that Chris gave to us, can I get a motion to receive and file that? Okay, Jennifer?
Second.
Okay, John, and all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moved. Okay, so item 7 is committee reports, so no committee reports tonight. And item 8 is consideration of issues separated from the consent agenda, nothing under there. So the next item is on page 42, item 9.1, the internal monthly report.
Sure. For the month of January, there were 2 complaints, complimentary correspondence. There was 1, and there was 1 grievance.
Okay, so
Receive
motion.
and file.
Okay, motion to receive and file.
So moved.
Okay, John and Jennifer, and all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And item 9.2. So this is the legal fees summary from that was requested by the St. John Common Council. So this is the entire summary of our legal fees, 2010 to 2014.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there anything we need to highlight on here? Any questions? Okay.
It's, as you remember, that I have received and filed.
Yeah.
Is if you wish to send this on to Common Council, or wish, it's the wish of the board here.
Yes. So.
It was requested by council, right?
Right. So motion to send this to council?
Yeah.
Okay, and to second that? Okay, Jennifer, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. And so moved. Okay, so item 9.3, this is the 2015 operating budget. So how will we cover the $320,000 shortfall?
So there is, as we're all aware, there was $320,000 less that was asked by council. So in essence, we have three areas that we're looking at. First is projected savings in 2015 recruitment. And as we saw from the administrative report, we had one member retire, and we'll have another member retire within a month. Peel Plaza building occupancy charge, it is about estimated $105,000 less, which is a good news story for us. And the latter part of $15,000 that we allocate for meals for detention, we have changed the way that we give meals out in terms of a full meal, etc. So best practices have been, it's funny, but it's a nutrition bar, it's a drink, and so we follow that process, and so that should give a savings somewhere around $15,000. So those are the three areas that we're looking at to cover the cost and our shortfall.
Just to amplify on the Peel Plaza occupancy charge, to my recollection, we are paying about $250,000 less to be in this building than when we were paying rent in the old dump down the road. So for all the business about the palace on the hill and all that stuff that's been going on in the media for all these years, being in this building cost us about $300,000 less than we were paying in rent for the old dump down there.
Other questions, comments on this, John?
If not, receive and file.
Oh, sorry, Jennifer, you had some?
Can I just ask probably a stupid question? What do
No.
you mean about, so detention meals, meaning, is there a time frame that you'd only get a nutrient bar, is that what you mean?
Well, we're only allowed to house somebody in detention for 24 hours.
Okay.
And so if we took somebody in, for instance, on the weekend, we'd have
Yeah.
to feed them through the weekend. So we reached out to best practices, what's out there. And there are a number of organizations that have consulted with nutritionists and all this stuff. And they said, look, the way we're able to deal with those costs is it is okay to offer a supplement bar or whatever that, and a drink as opposed to a full meal. So we've
So
cut
you mean
costs.
like a meal replacement bar, not like a granola
Yeah,
bar?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Not a Snickers.
So I should granola for an hour,
Yeah.
or for
Yeah.
2 hours.
Dips.
Yeah.
You have to remember that court on the weekend, if there's somebody locked up, it's Saturday and Sunday mornings, it still goes on.
Okay.
There's nobody there for 24 hours. It's
Right.
every morning at 11 o'clock,
Yeah.
10 o'clock, 9
Okay,
o'clock.
okay.
So we're feeding them the
Something-
nutrients
yeah,
they
yeah,
need
okay.
Right.
while they're here for 24 hours.
Gotcha.
And we encourage them not to be
Very
here.
rarely they do
And
that.
any accommodations are probably,
Very rarely they would be.
Yes.
I don't know where, if you say the Ritz, but it's just not that. Now, having said that, our detention is an excellent facility,
Yeah.
a brand new facility, but the meals are, you're not gonna get too
That's right.
heavy on the meals.
It's not 5-star.
Just say maybe we could feed the animals. So on the retirement, you're
Okay.
saving 200,000?
Yeah,
So that means we're not hiring somebody else.
that's correct.
Okay.
Now, having said that, if we realize other retirements, and we can only go by when we're notified.
That's what I mean, like at what point do we get, we're down to about 120,
No, we're down to about 147 right now.
147, so at what point do people keep retiring, we have to,
Well, as I brought in previous reports, we've cut back on one member in terms of management team.
Yeah.
And there may be an opportunity that may even have to go one less than that as well. And, what we've always tried to do is make sure that we maintain as much as possible our frontline staff.
yes, that's what
And our
you're...
first, yeah, but there is that point where that if you get below a number, what you're doing is paying overtime to do
Yeah,
a
we
normal
talked about
duty.
that.
Yep. We have to be very cautious of that. So to answer your question, or what I perceive to be your question, is that at some point, if there were two other members decided to retire this year,
Yes.
would we hire? Yeah, probably we would hire, yeah.
But right now, this is,
Yeah.
good.
Because you're getting into increased overtime because of,
Well, we shouldn't be, but
but you would be if you.
Yeah.
That's, as the staffing level goes down, you're potentially raising the risk of more.
well, it's a that's correct.
Of the members,
But it's a
yes.
combination of
Yeah.
a number of things. It's a combination of sick time, and a lot of other factors as well. But you try to manage that closest to the bone as possible. And like, if again, we go beyond those retirement levels, we certainly will have to hire.
Okay, so a motion to receive and file the report.
So moved.
Okay, John and Jennifer seconded, and all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded. Forgot that one. Okay, motion so moved. Okay, so item 9.4 on page 49. So this report was prepared, I think I had requested some background when we were talking about overtime, right? So trying to understand the structure of the different departments, and specifically in crime, criminal investigation, not
Division.
crime and criminal investigation division, to try to understand, is there an opportunity to change the staffing model based on how it's structured, and kind of just to get a little more background around that. So this report is in response to that request.
That's correct, Madam Chairman. Anyway, I'll leave the report with you. It's pretty straightforward. It talks about our staffing levels and the times that we are available, and it starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we're here until 11 in the evening. And those are the three main areas: major crime and felony protection and street crime. So those areas are covered. We have an on-call in the evenings and the weekends if an issue would come up, such as a major crime such as a homicide that we just had, and those type of things. Our street crime unit doesn't have a specific time. When I say that, it could be 8 to 4, but if they're project driven, they could be here. They could start the shift at 10 o'clock tonight, depending on the project they're working on. So their shift it varies. But if they could start today at 8 o'clock and off at 4, or we're going to work 3 days, or we're going to work a week on a particular project because of the project, we have to work in the evening. So they adjust their times.
They adjust. That's not overtime.
No.
Okay.
Everything we have.
Until it gets beyond a certain point.
Well,
I would think whatever's in
40 hours.
40, right, okay.
As we've talked about, the model here is really
Yes.
when we get into a serious crime,
Yeah.
we front end load that. We put the members
Right.
in there. It's to glean evidence and to do, all those type of things. And just for instance, this homicide we just had, we kept the scene for 3 days, and our identification people spent 3 days in that scene to process the scene for this particular crime. So, they're able to work, change shifts, and vary their times. But after 8 hours, the collective agreement kicks in, and it is what it is.
So it has to be,
Yeah.
in there, yeah.
And we wouldn't have somebody working in major crime after 11 o'clock as a regular duty, because a lot of what they do are interviews and those type of things. Well, our folks, our citizens, are sleeping at that particular time, so it wouldn't make sense that it wouldn't be the best value of their time.
Yeah, and I think my question was really around, is there an opportunity to move to kind of more shift? And given the numbers here, and I don't have a huge background in kind of this kind of human resources, but I'm pretty clear that with 28 total, there's not much you can do with shift coverage with that kind of number, and with all the different functions that you've got there. So,
and 2 of those 28 are from outside agencies. One's RCMP,
right.
and one's KV. So we augment our street crime unit with 2 people from outside to assist us in that.
Yeah.
And because some of the crime, as you know, is not just localized in St. John. It comes from KV, or it comes from wherever. So these folks are there to sort of thwart that if they can, if something happens in their areas.
Okay, good.
And Chief, do you have the power, I guess, to, like, say, major crime and victim services? Can you move somebody from one to the other?
Victim services is a civilian, first of all,
Okay.
and it's a standalone person. It's just one individual.
Okay.
Now, the victim services coordinator, she has a number of volunteers that work with her to assist. So, to give you an example of what the victim service coordinator would do, she would, if we had a crime scene and there's a victim, she could speak to the victim, but if there were witnesses that are having issues, she could speak to the witnesses. If somebody lost somebody, a death, she could speak to the family, an officer, and those types of things, so that's what she would do. But in terms of moving people around, we don't, in terms of like taking somebody from major crime and putting them in another unit, street
Yes.
crime, for instance, I can't do that.
Yeah, collective agreement holds you.
That's right.
Okay. Because you got 6 blocks here and groups or whatever, and if you could, move one from.
Well, but an example of that is you've this homicide we just had when we talk about front-end loading. We'll take people from everywhere to work on that, so we can take people from family protection, for instance,
Right.
in our street crime unit or major crime unit to work on that file for a while, and then we send them back to their normal duties.
Yeah.
So we have the ability to do that, and we do that, and we augment it with patrol members as well.
Yeah.
So we can go from an area of, say major crime is 10, we could have 25 people working on a crime for a short period of time,
Okay.
and then they go back to the regular duties because we're doing that front end.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So unless there's any questions or further questions, Madam Chairman, the purpose was just to inform, receive and file.
It's great, very, very.
And this is cobbled together by the deputy chief. Had to get him to do something.
Don't move.
Okay, so John moved the motion. Second. Okay, Jonathan, all in favor? Okay. Contrary minded? Nope. Okay. All right, so the next item on the agenda is a motion that I put in. This is on page 52 of your packet. So the background here is, this really came to my mind after we had our initial discussion at our last meeting on the strategic planning process, and there's a lot of detail in there, and there was a lot that I think, the strategic plan is really where it's our role to put our fingerprints on it, specifically around the vision statement, but also kind of those strategic directions and where we feel we want to focus our limited resources. So out of that, I really thought, a lot of us are new around the table, and we haven't had the opportunity to learn a lot about how the force operates. So I thought that it would be helpful if we all schedule a ride-along. I know some have already done this. So my motion is that all commissioners schedule a ride-along between now and our April meeting with a member of the St. John Police Force Patrol Division. And ideally, each commissioner would have an opportunity to schedule both a day and a night shift to kind of see where the differences are and to get a better appreciation for the challenges that our members face, so that when we have the opportunity to provide input on the strategic plan and where we should focus, that we have really that firsthand view, so that we can provide that input in a more informed way. So that is my motion.
I'll second it, but I'd like to speak.
Okay, all right, so do we have to have a, okay, you're going to second the motion and then we can speak about it. Is this how it
Yeah,
works?
let me.
All right, so you second the motion. John?
Well, I just want to be sure we're talking about the front seat, not the back seat of the car. I don't want, if we're going in the front seat.
Well, you're
I'm all
entirely
for
in
it.
control of,
I've been in
your...
the back seat.
We're not, Commissioner, we're not talking about your youth now. We're
Yes. So very clearly between now and the end of April. So
Yeah.
not anything that you may have done in the past. We'll excuse that.
We'll go in the front seat anytime at all.
That's
Go
right.
ahead.
Okay.
Just on the question.
Yes.
The last ride-along I did with the deputy chief, he expressed some concerns, chief, and might go to the operations side of it, about having members of the commission in active patrol units that were responding, especially to events, because it may create issues.
Yeah.
The way the deputy explained it to me, I suppose it could put a member of the commission in the position of being a witness to an event.
So what the deputy will do is, we will assign a member that will follow an active car, but you won't get into the middle of that. You won't be put in harm's way. And so
Chris,
that,
normally.
Yeah.
All the time.
Dress warmly.
Yeah.
Or yes, or walk the beat.
No, but you may, if there's something they're responding to, obviously, you may have to get out at some point. They have to get somebody to come pick you up. So you may have to stand maybe somewhere for 5 minutes for safety reasons, or hopefully it wouldn't happen, but they certainly would let you out and not put you in harm's way. That's for sure.
That was certainly something they.
Yeah, absolutely, very important. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, so
The
you've
protein
said. Do we get to experience the full, maybe we can have the
So does that
protein
mean we
bar?
get the luck? Yeah.
Exactly, we get the full, we can, no, we're in the front seat.
So this is going to be done before the end of April, you want, right?
Yeah, I think before the end of April. I know at our next meeting, we're gonna talk more about, what's that?
It's warmer after.
I know, but we got a job to do.
I'll
It's
go
warm in
with
Cuba.
Get it over with.
Yeah, I think I think originally I had said before our next meeting, but a lot of people are going away for March break, and so it's not really reasonable. So, end of April, that's what I said.
Just
Yep,
talk to the deputy and he'll
Okay.
make sure that's all lined up and make sure that we have it in the right positions and where you need to be. He'll look right at it.
okay, so the motion's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Contrary minded? So Mel, you're an aye? You're in favor? Okay, great. Okay. I didn't, yeah, all in favor. Great, okay, so that is so moved. All right, and so I'll leave it to each of you individually, or that's probably
Do you want us
easier.
to let you know, like?
Hey, so what I think
Yeah.
is best is at our April meeting,
Okay.
we'll put an item on the agenda to report out on kind of your experiences, and we'll talk through that. I think
Okay.
we'll do a bit of a roundtable and
Great.
see if there's any insights and anything that we want to
So
bring forward.
You gotta go through
Yeah.
2 of them before the end of April then.
Ideally.
I
So-
only did 1, so I only have 1.
Oh, there, you
I only have to serve 1.
you can do, if you did a day shift, try a night shift.
Oh, I
And
did a
we'll,
night shift.
obviously, we'll do, it may be a challenge
Don't go home.
to get everybody scheduled, but if we can coordinate, that would be great. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, and item 9.6, this is another motion that I put forward. So in thinking about our role as the citizen oversight body for the police force, someone had actually suggested this to me, and I thought it was a great idea. We have most of our meetings in this location, obviously, but there are a lot of citizens who are impacted and benefit from the police service firsthand. So really it's in our priority neighborhood specifically. So the motion is that the St. John Board of Police Commissioners create a rotating schedule and alternate meeting locations to ensure all our citizens have the opportunity to attend our open sessions so they can provide their input directly to the board in an environment they're familiar with, namely in community centers located in our priority neighborhoods. So that's the motion.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Second, okay. Second. Okay. Does anybody have any comments? Questions? Yes,
Yeah,
John?
just one thing that you should
Yeah.
be aware of, that before I came on board, the previous commission did in fact do that.
Okay, yeah,
And they found that there was 0 response.
okay.
So I
Good
think
to know.
it's a good
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
But they did that, and then Bill, you probably were, nobody showed up.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe this is a different time, maybe this is more interesting.
Or maybe not, but maybe we can try it for a
Or
year.
maybe you need to.
I would
advertise it
suggest
better.
that we had put a bit of communication.
Exactly,
Exactly, yeah.
yes, yeah.
Maybe it wasn't community,
Yeah.
but there was apparently 0 participation, so,
Yeah, and maybe there's a way we can,
yeah.
yeah.
Can I
we'll
ask
think
a
about
question?
that.
You
Yeah.
probably know the answer to this. Did you have organizations like One Change and Crescent Valley
Mm.
Resource Center when you did that? They were, okay.
We did One Change. We actually did it at the school at one.
Mhm.
Okay.
At one point as well. So I think it's a great idea. And we did it at, the Resource Center is another place. I'm just trying to think of other. But I think it's, if we're gonna do that, we probably need to put a little bit of
Yeah.
communication behind it so people can know that it's.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea to leverage those community groups.
Sure.
They're in there, right, so have the conversation well in advance, provide them with the schedule, maybe put some posters up, or we'll figure out, I think, the way
Yeah,
to
because
get
we'd
that out
obviously you
there.
have to talk to the folks to see if they can entertain us. And
Yeah, exactly,
obviously
we need to
it's-
set it up anyway, so while we set that up,
We could talk to Juanita Block about
Yes.
putting it around the block,
yes,
so that she can get the word
Yeah.
out through around the block.
yeah,
One
and there are,
logistical question,
Yes.
Wi-Fi, because I'm thinking of like Crescent, like Town Association or the schools that there wouldn't be, so we'd have to think of a,
do we need Wi-Fi?
well, no, I'm just thinking of us, right? Because we
But
don't
it's,
really
if you
have-
download it in
Yeah, that's what I
advance,
did.
Well,
I
there
just
you
put
go.
it-
Yeah.
then we're okay.
You're a
We
tech
should
step
be-
ahead of me and anything else.
Oh, yeah, not me.
It doesn't happen very often, so I'll take it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, perfect.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay,
Agree with
so I'll work with Jackie and we'll figure out
That's
kind of
right.
how to implement that, and then we'll report back.
So Tim Hortons, McDonald's.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, that'll be the next phase.
We're gonna get them.
We're getting right in there, we're going right to the Tim Hortons. Okay. All right, so we didn't finish that motion, so you seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, contrary minded? Okay, so moved, and can I get a motion to adjourn the
So
open
moved.
session? Second, all in favor? Okay, adjourn. Thank you.